Hello and welcome to the Penalty Box Perspective podcast. My name's Nathaniel, and yes, I'm joined once again by my good friend Matt. 55 times I've said that now. How are you doing today?
I'm very good, mate. Yeah, thank you. How are you? You all good?
Yeah, good. Just thinking, it's actually probably more than 55 because we had all the Olympic episodes as well. So many times I've called you my good friend, and what have you ever done for me?
Wow, off the rip, just absolutely abusing me. That's terrific news. That's terrific news. I don't have any retort to that. I've got nothing. I've got nothing.
Oh, do you want to sign us off then? No. We've had a good week of playoff hockey, depending on how you look at it. The Wild aren't looking so pretty. But we got some news, we got some hockey to cover off, so I think we should get straight into it, unless...
Yeah, no, let's jump right in, and I believe we're going to start with news of a contract extension, Nathaniel.
Yeah, contract extension that rules out one of the top centre, I say prospects, free agent prospects in this upcoming season. Charlie Coyle for the Columbus Blue Jackets has signed a 6-year, $36 million contract. What are your initial thoughts on that?
I was saying to you beforehand. I mean, Charlie Coyle's 34. He signs a 6x6. You probably like that deal for the first 2 years. You probably hate it for the remaining 4. That deal takes him up to the age of 40 with Columbus, and I know that players play a little bit longer now, but I think that $6 million when he's 38, 39, going into 40, I think that could end up being a little bit of a problem. But if you're Charlie Coyle, you get that security, you get the paycheck. He's had a great year this year. One of the best years he's had in his career so far. And fair play to him and his agent for getting it done. I mean, it's an important piece for Columbus. Like you said, it takes one of the free agents off the board, and I mean, certainly with the way that the cap's going up at the moment, free agency over the next 3, 4, 5 years is really going to be the most anticlimactic thing. Guys have the money at the moment to lock up their key pieces long term. So, we're really not going to see many of these kind of big UFAs hit the market like we have done in the past.
Yeah, and I think this is where this contract comes down to. I don't think Columbus expects Charlie Coyle to be playing at $6 million a year value at age 40. What this does is spread their money out across many years worth of the cap. Instead of signing a 4-year, $9 million contract, which is probably, I mean, you could argue, is he playing at a $9 million a year level?
No,
probably not. But with the free agent market and the needs for teams for a first line or for a decent centre, that value gets pushed up. So instead of paying it front loaded and impacting the cap for their current, in the next couple of years, they probably just said, right, look, we're probably going to play you for 3. I'll either move you on if another team picks up that cap, fair play. If not, they'll probably be comfortable with where the cap is going to sit with $6 million on the books.
Yeah, he also
to get Charlie Coyle for the next few years.
He could be a buyout candidate as well, potentially for those last couple of years. Maybe they buy him out of that contract, which incurs a slight salary cap penalty, as Minnesota know all too well over the years with Parise and Suter. So it maybe he gets bought out, but still I think it's probably a good thing for everyone involved. Like you said, the need that teams have for a top 6 center, he probably could have gone out and got maybe like 7.5, 8 on the free agent market, but if he's settled in Columbus, then he gets to kind of plant his roots there long term. So fair play, Charlie Coyle.
Yeah. Now, just while we touch on the salary cap stuff, it was announced that this year's salary cap is increasing to $104 million. So it's just the money's increasing tenfold.
Yeah, it is, and look, that the salary cap going up means that there's more money in the NHL because more people are watching the NHL, and there's more sponsorship, there's more revenue and it means that they can increase the salary cap for for teams. So not a problem with that at all. It's rising to 1.4, 104 next year. It'll probably keep going up over the next few years. At rates that we haven't really seen before in the past, which is going to be really interesting to see how teams sort of navigate that over the next few years. And we saw, obviously, like the deal that Kaprizov signed, obviously seemed massive at the time, but, perhaps, what was Kaprizov's? Was it 17.5, was it?
17 flat, I think.
Okay. That 17 million in 3 years' time might be the equivalent of what you'd be paying a $13 million player now. And I don't think anyone would have batted an eye if Kaprizov signed for 13 million. It would have been probably a fair figure to land on. So it will, like I said, it will kind of hamper free agency for a while, but it will keep teams in a fairly competitive space, you would think, for a bit longer. It means that they can sign and keep their players around, but we are going to be seeing, the average salary is now going to start. It's going to start kind of going on the rise, and I'm kind of interested to see, especially with Connor McDavid, with his contract renewal coming up in a couple of years' time. Could we see maybe the NHL's first $20 million player?
Yeah, I think there's going to be an increase in sign and trade deals as opposed to traditional free agents, just so that teams can have that bit of control and get stuff back. It's going to make drafting, mock drafts very difficult, because I feel like there's going to be a lot of picks exchanged for signed players' contracts and stuff like that, and it's just going to be a whole great mess. And free agency is going to be almost a thing of the past in terms of a glitz and glamour part of the season.
Yeah, it will, but it'll come back around, because these things always, because everyone's kind of average salary will be going up. We'll reach the same spot in 5-6 years' time when, all those guys start, teams start getting right up against the cap again and struggling to sort of figure out what they're going to do, and maybe they have to let certain pieces go. But we're still a way away from that yet, I think.
Yeah. Right, we'll move on then. And we've got a list of things we want to talk about. Why don't you pick one off the list? What interests you most?
Tell you what. I'll say the one that interests me somewhat, but I'm sticking with the conversation on the contract front. Is that as we understand, the Pittsburgh Penguins are working on a contract extension for Evgeny Malkin. Probably one of the least surprising pieces of news. One that but needed mentioning nonetheless. Don't see Malkin going anywhere else than Pittsburgh. He's said that he wants to be a Penguin for life, and I think this next contract will tie him over for that very nicely. I'm interested to see what the kind of final figure will be. I'm sure at this point in time, with the Penguins being where they are, I could see Malkin taking a really team friendly deal to maybe try and help them add one more cup to the trophy cabinet, one more Stanley Cup ring to his personal collection. I'm not sure what his current cap is. I can see you
That's what
typing.
I've just been looking at.
I was going to say I could see I could hear your fingers typing away there. I imagine that was going to be what you were looking at. I don't know if he's on some sort of 7.1 jersey number deal at the moment.
He's not actually 6.1.
6.1. I mean, that's
a steal for Malkin.
Yeah, absolutely it is. Even at the player that he is now, you would still, it wouldn't surprise me if they keep him at that 6.1. And then the value of that contract looks even better. Again with the rising cap. So I fully expect this extension to be done probably in the next week or two. I'm sure they're just hashing out the finer details and the structure of it all and everything. But yeah, I'm sure Malkin will be remaining in Pittsburgh for the remainder of his career. But I'll let you take the next talking point off the list.
Yeah, we've got to follow up on that Charlie McAvoy, Happy Gilmore moment. I think we touched on it last week, where he took a massive swing with his massive stick and clonk somebody over the head with it. Giggity. um, well, obviously, he went to a hearing, and instead of the traditional being fined a maximum $5,000 as per the CBA agreement, which I always laugh at. These guys are earning millions of pounds, and they do something really egregious, and they get 5,000 taken off of them. But no, McAvoy has been hit with a 6-game suspension, which,
I mean,
with Boston going out the playoffs, will lead into regular season next year.
I mean, I think that's fair. I think a 6-game suspension is pretty kind of on the money. I mean, I know, fortunately, Zach Benson didn't come away with too much in terms of repercussions, but it was still just a really, really dangerous, boneheaded, not thinking properly play from McAvoy, who, like you said last week, this is a guy who's in a key leadership position within Boston. Obviously, he was a massive part of them making the playoffs this year, and obviously fought through everything that he had to fight through to get there, obviously with his jaw, and I know he said afterwards he's playing with a broken hand and everything like that, but you can't go losing your head like that on the ice and taking, it's one thing to give someone a little cross-check in the back, it's another thing to take your stick and two-handed just swing for his head.
Literally assaulting somebody with a weapon.
Yeah, absolutely. If he did that out in the street, he'd be sitting next to Gavin McKenna in the penitentiary. And Gavin McKenna's mum, I don't know if you saw that this week, that Gavin McKenna's mum has been charged with providing alcohol to minors. Yeah. The online recourse I heard of that, of just like, wait, McKenna's mum's being charged for just being a cool mum.
It's only adding to this to the draft stock to this player.
Yeah, absolutely. She's a good time. I mean, that is going to really kind of cripple the Bruins at the start of next season. But McAvoy's only got himself to blame. So
this is the thing. Like, I don't agree with what he's done at all. But he's played this year with a fractured jaw. And he's had obviously a fractured hand and stuff, and he has been pushed around a bit. Obviously, all these hockey players do. For me, part of this, that was a red mist moment. He's lost his head after being a play where he thought he was going to get seriously injured again. He's clearly got some kind of a sort of mental block or trauma-induced behaviours there, because it did happen so fast. He thought he got slew-footed going full pelt into the boards. It wasn't quite like that, but obviously hindsight's a wonderful thing. So it's just about where is he at with his mental health, if that's what he immediately goes to. It feels like he needs a bit of a TLC as well, but I mean, you can't do that to Benson's head. So
no,
worthy 6-game suspension.
Yeah, I would say so. Right, the head coaching front in Edmonton. Chris Knobloch seemingly on the block. The Oilers, by all accounts, made a request to speak to Bruce Cassidy regarding their vacant head coaching position, but they were told no. Nathaniel, do you want to lead us off on that?
Yeah, I don't really understand the nuances for this. Excuse me. But obviously Vegas sacked Bruce Cassidy.
Mm-hmm.
So surely that would release him from said contract. I think what it comes down to, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is that Bruce Cassidy, because he got sacked, could just sit there and take the money paid by Vegas as per his contract until that contract's up. But then how does Vegas get to say no to the Oilers speaking to Cassidy? If Cassidy wants to pick it up with the Oilers, then why can't he do that?
The short version is I don't know the ins and outs, but what I would imagine it would technically be, and you see this in sports a fair amount, so Cassidy is relieved as his position as head coach, and what they'll probably have done is placed him onto like what's called like gardening leave. So he technically is still under contract with Vegas, still collecting the salary he would have collected from Vegas for the remainder of his contract. So technically, he is still an employee of the Vegas Golden Knights, and if anyone wants to speak to him in relation to a head coaching vacancy or anything like that, they have to get permission from his current employer, who in this case obviously is Vegas, in order to speak to him. So whilst he is technically still under contract with Vegas, despite the fact he got fired and relieved from his position, is still an employee there. So any sort of contact would have to be arranged through Vegas. And clearly, Vegas being the conniving and petty organisation that they have known to be, kind of slam the door on that. Maybe they see the Oilers as a bit too much of a threat, but they didn't slam the door on everyone, Nathaniel.
The LA Kings have made an approach as well, and that was apparently accepted. I mean, it's too early to tell right now. Like, I think Oilers and the Kings both have their coaches intact, so it's a bit of a strange situation. But I thought it was worth mentioning just for Vegas sticking the Nylander finger up at the Oilers. But seemingly don't see the Kings as a threat.
I think that is probably the way they are looking at it. Especially within their division at the moment, especially within the Pacific. Obviously, Edmonton ran them pretty close this year. Do you want your former head coach going to probably your biggest interdivisional rival? Probably not. Would you rather they went to a team a bit further down the division, who maybe aren't as kind of hot on your coattails as the Oilers are? Yeah, it's a little less offensive, isn't it? So, once again, I think it's Vegas sort of any opportunity they have to meddle, they will meddle.
You thought this guy wasn't good enough for you. You thought Tortorella was a better option than Bruce Cassidy, who's done some great work for you over the years. But now he's just started messing around with his future. Either he's not good enough for you, so release him, or he's good enough for you to worry about him going to another team, and therefore you should have just kept him as your coach anyway.
Yeah.
It's just Vegas being Vegas, and I don't know. Cassidy should just ride it out and get all the money from Vegas just to screw him over. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. The final story, and I want to tie this into our playoff coverage. So bear with me, Nathaniel, whilst we do this. But the now eliminated Philadelphia Flyers, swept by the Carolina Hurricanes in the second round of the Eastern Conference Playoffs. Carolina becoming the first team in NHL history to go 8-0 in their first two rounds of the playoffs. So, they've been an absolute juggernaut in these playoffs so far. But the Philadelphia Flyers, off of the back of that sweep, and off of the back of scratching Matvei Michkov in place of Jet Luchenko, who's come in from juniors, and let's give him a go and let's see if he can provide something Michkov can't. Are, by all accounts, potentially listening to trade offers for Matvei Michkov. I mean, I think it's something that we've been calling for a while. Makes absolutely no sense from Philly's perspective. But I think for his perspective, and because Philly are a bit of a shite organisation with some questionable decision-making, if we can get him out of that cauldron, then, we'll see. But to be honest, his value is going to be at an all-time low, and it depends what they're going to be wanting in return.
I just don't get it. Like, he's not performing how you want him to perform, so you slander him through the media. You do all of the stuff that you're doing with this young player, and now you say he's up on the trade block. Like, why would you do it? Why would you scream in the streets that your product is rubbish? And I said, does anybody want it? Like, it's just, it's just backwards thinking. They don't know what they're doing, and I hope he gets traded. I hope he gets traded to a decent team, and he just shows them how stupid they've been. If I'm honest, that's
Yeah.
what it comes down to for me.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who was taken 7th overall 3 years ago. Um, and
Some players picked 7th overall are still in the minors.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And let's not have two ways about it. The reason that he fell to Philadelphia in the first place was because there was a whole conversation about the fact of they didn't know if he was going to come over from Russia. He, kind of made it quite clear that he was quite happy playing in Russia, and he didn't know if he was going to come over to the US or North America, I should say. Sorry, and that was the reason why he fell as far as he fell. He was a guy who basically was, if it wasn't for the fact that of that Russian factor, was being talked about in the 2nd overall pick kind of territory. Undeniable talent, and he's just not being used in a way for Philly at the moment that excels to his strengths. And you have this ridiculously gifted prospect. He's the guy you should be building your team around. He's the guy who you make the system fit him, and not the other way around. But he was scratched numerous times over the regular season. And sometimes, you scratch a young player for a game because they need a break, and that's fine. Sometimes they need a different viewpoint. They need to watch a game from the press box and see it from kind of like a bit more of a zoomed out lens. Sometimes the game load that these young players come into, obviously going from playing like 50 so games in juniors or in Russia or whatever to an 82 game schedule, is quite taxing, and sometimes they just need a break. But it didn't feel like that for Michkov. It felt like he was being ostracized by the team. Felt as though he was being called out for his effort and his weight and his application in games. And, just completely tanking his self-confidence, his value. And then to scratch him in an all-important playoff game when you're facing elimination, and this is nothing against Jet Luchenko. I'm sure he's a fine prospect, but you're replacing Michkov with Luchenko in a do-or-die playoff game in the 2nd round of the Stanley Cup. Like, what are you doing? What are you playing at?
Mm-hmm. And they've got it's sort of self-fulfilled prophecy now for Philadelphia, because they've got part of Martone, who was drafted this year, coming at the end of the season, and he's been playing in the playoffs, and has been a light. He's been very, very good. And now they're looking at Martone with rose-tinted glasses and thinking, and then looking over at Michkov in the corner and like, why aren't you this guy? And Konechny has come out in the media and given an interview, and he's sort of saying how difficult it must be for a native Russian speaker to travel across the world and live in a new country and learn a new language and a new sort of way of life and everything like that. It's a big upshift. Like, it must be very, very different. And I can't speak to it because I haven't been to America and I haven't been to Russia. But if I moved across the world to live in a different culture, then I would potentially find it hard to settle in as well. And then everything else on top of that, the constant criticism, the dropping in and out, all this stuff. They're just setting themselves up to fail. That's what it is, and it's for me, it's putting Philly in a really, really bad light when this is the way this is going, because yeah, Marto's doing great, and they're just pointing at him and saying, "Be like him."
Yeah, it doesn't really work, does it? It's really, it's a real shame, for Michkov, because he made it clear when he came over that he was really excited to come play in Philadelphia, and he was looking forward to making the transition, and it just seems to not have gone that particular way for him. But if he's on the trade block at the moment, I don't know what kind of return Philadelphia will be expecting. If they're obviously he was taken 7th overall, you want are they wanting immediate NHL help now? Are they wanting to restock the prospect pool a little bit? If that is the case, are they wanting 2 first-rounders and a prospect? Because that isn't going to happen.
You won't get a third-round pick in a minute. Just 1 third-round pick for Michkov.
Yeah, maybe it's one of those cases where, and again, just using Chicago as an example, only because it's what I know. You've got a guy like Kevin Korchinski who is was drafted in the top 10, struggled so far to sort of establish himself as a defenseman in the NHL. Maybe there's quite a lot. You've got Levshinov, you've got Rinzel, you've got Vlasic, you've got kind of all these young defensemen there. Maybe he's someone who needs a change of scenery. Maybe Michkov needs a change of scenery. Maybe there's some sort of, maybe it's that kind of deal, or maybe it's Korchinski plus mid-range prospects. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. That's certainly going to be one to keep an eye on over the summer, I think. But it's difficult times for Michkov and Philly at the moment. Not to mention as well, leading into our playoff coverage. Obviously, they got heartily beaten by the Carolina Hurricanes, who, just to kind of move the conversation their direction slightly, have been absolutely outstanding so far in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
They absolutely have. 8-0. And yes, they played the Senators. They played 2 teams who've squeezed into the playoffs at the end. Ottawa and Philly. But to not even drop a game, not even look like they're going to drop a game, in all honesty. They're a powerhouse. And once the result of the Sabres Canadiens burn each other out after their 2 wars of series they've had to reach the final, they're going to be so refreshed. So ready, and it's a scary prospect.
Yeah, it really is. And, looking at that Montreal and Buffalo series, 2-2 at the moment, it's gone back and forth. Sabres took game 1, Canadiens took, 2 and 3, Sabres winning that all-important kind of game 4. It's been another really, really good series so far. It's been really, really enjoyable to watch. Going to be really sad to see one of these teams go out. They're both worthy conference finalists. And because I don't have sort of a personal investment in either team, I can really just sit back and enjoy the great hockey that these 2 teams are putting on at the moment.
Yeah. I don't mind who goes through from this matchup.
No.
I think it's great. And I mean, I've got nothing against the Hurricanes, but I just love like an underdog story. And I want whoever goes through this series to beat Carolina. But I feel like this is going to go to 7 games. It's going to be an absolute war. And they're going to be living daylights out of each other, and then again go up against the Hurricanes and probably get swept 4-0 again at this rate.
I mean, they can't do it in 3 series in a row. Surely not. They have to drop a game at some point to Carolina, but you just don't know, do you? Because, obviously Montreal have already played a 7-game series against the Lightning. Buffalo played 6. So, they'll both be coming in with both more than 10 games played. And, Carolina will be fully rested, recuperated, getting all the sports massage treatments and everything to make sure they're all ready to go. It's that whichever team gets through from this second round between Buffalo and Montreal, it's going to be, they're going to be right on the back foot.
Yeah. But just talk about the Sabres and the Canadiens series in itself. I mean, I've only sort of watched mainly the highlights of these games, but just looking at the scorelines and stuff like that, Montreal, when they win, they seem to be doing so in a lot more comfortable fashion. When Buffalo are edging the closer games. What's your sort of take on that? Do you think the Canadiens do have it when they're on fire, that they're the better team kind of thing?
Yeah, I think it all sort of depends on Buffalo's defense, and it's a strong defense, it's a physical defense, but sometimes they're just not on it. And when they're not, the Canadiens are a team that are such an offensive powerhouse that they'll just pick them apart. Through Hudson, Suzuki, Caulfield, Slavkovsky, Newhook, Doc. They've got a lot of offensive tools there. That can dismantle any team when they're at 100%, let alone any night where they're kind of somewhat off it. But then, conversely, when they are on their game, they really can shut them down. And then it just requires the other end. It requires Thompson, it requires Tuck and Doan, and everyone else to get it done. From there, which they have been able to do on a couple of occasions, and sort of squeak them out to a couple of victories. It's a really, really fascinating series. Probably the most sort of interesting of this second round, for me anyway. And I'm kind of excited to see. I'm excited to see where the series goes, and do we get treated to another 7-game spectacular?
I certainly think so. That maybe just what I want. Right. And with the Eastern sort of tied up there, we'll head into the Western. Now, do you want to start Colorado, Minnesota, or Vegas, Anaheim?
I'll prolong your misery for now. We'll start with Vegas and Anaheim. Another really interesting series. It's one that has swung back and forth. It's been 1-0, 1-1, 2-1, 2-2. Now Vegas leading 3-2 after Dorofeyev scores the OT winner to take Game 5. Man, what a player Dorofeyev is, man. He's going to be such an interesting conversation piece for the summer. Obviously, with him being an RFA, and I really do think that Vegas are going to struggle to keep him around. He's a power play god. He scored something like 70 goals in the last 2 seasons, and a good. I mean, I wouldn't know off the top of my head, but I would say almost half of those come exclusively on the power play. But teams, you need those guys. If you have a guy who can score every time your power play unit goes out, they are so valuable. And he's not bad at 5-on-5 either. But yeah, he got 2 in that game last night, and Vegas currently have the edge. They go back to Anaheim for Game 6 on Friday, and again, it's a really difficult a really difficult series to call. We could be looking at another 7-game series here. It's a really, really hard series to pick.
Yeah. I think as well as Dorofeyev going off, I think Mitch Marner is just proving again and again and again that the issue is Toronto.
Yeah. I wouldn't even go as far as to say he's proving anybody wrong. He's just proving everyone what we already knew, barring the people in the Maple Leafs head office and their fan base. He's really, really excelled in these playoffs so far. He's been really, really good to watch. And just Mitch Marner's one of those guys who he's a do-it-all kind of player. He can proper 200-foot, can do both ends, can score, can create, and he seems really happy playing in Vegas, playing with that gigantic smile on his face from his rather large mouth. And you know what? I'm just
personal.
Yeah, anyone who can escape the kind of hellhole of playing in Toronto and to find better pastures somewhere else, fair play to them. And Vegas got they're aggressive. We know that much, and they really laid it all out there to get that deal done. And fair play to them. It's not often that I will commend Vegas for much. But for as much as we criticise them, whenever they do have a rare moment of doing something good, I feel like that deserves noting as well. And certainly the acquisition of Mitch Marner was exactly that.
Yeah, slips a bit of taste in your mouth. Could it not be any other team that he proves Toronto wrong with than Vegas? But we'll give some love to Anaheim. My concern going into this series was that their defence would just obliterate and let them down. And it hasn't quite been the same series as it was against the Oilers. There's been a lot closer games. There was that 6-2 loss against Vegas in Game 3. But other than that, they've been kind of a bit more secure. Obviously, they won the game against Edmonton, the series against Edmonton, and they're currently losing against Vegas, so maybe having a worse defence would be better for them. But one name I do want to shout out is Beckett Seneca. He's just been insane in these playoffs. He is a player.
Yeah, he's an absolute stud, and when he was taken third overall in his draft class, no one was more stunned than Beckett Seneca himself. He couldn't believe that he'd gone that high, and I don't think it was a massive reach. He was certainly in the conversation for that third overall pick at the time, and but he's one of those guys who, a bit like Porter Martone, and there are, I think, some similarities across both of their games, in terms of their size and the way they play the game, where in both of their respective draft classes they were being talked about as going as high as 2 or 3, and they were talked as going low as 7 or 8. And so they were kind of one of those guys who was really up and down the draft boards. Similarly with this year's draft, Ethan Belchets is another one who I've seen kind of moving up and down the draft boards quite a lot. He's a 6'5" powerhouse of a forward. And I suppose maybe it's something to do with that style of player, where their draft stock is potentially there to be fluctuated. But obviously he's a Calder nominee this season. I know we're going to do an awards rundown in our next episode. He's not going to win it. It's Matthew Schaefer's trophy to lose. But still, to be a Calder finalist is super impressive, and he was second in rookie scoring this year, only behind Ivan Demidov. So he's been every bit as good as advertised. Provides a real power forward, dynamic edge to that Anaheim offense. Complements the likes of Gauthier and Carlson amazingly. And, those three in particular, they are going to be the future of that Anaheim forward core. And I'm super excited to see what they can do. But yeah, absolutely love Seneca. He's a great player.
Yeah. But yeah, so both of these teams are good. They're definitely playoff teams. And they're putting a good show on for it. But arguably, one of these teams is going to be in the Western Conference Final, when, for me, it should be the other two teams that are currently duking it out. Again, I'm going to bash the current playoff structure because it is bonkers. The Minnesota Wild, who finished third in the entire conference, have to play the second team in the entire conference, duke that out and won, and then have to face the first overall in the entire conference before they even get to the Western Conference Final, even before they get to the Stanley Cup Final. It's not fair, Matt. And I'm putting the toys out the pram. The pessimism has been exchanged for just downright misery. But we're currently 3-1 down, and I think next game will be it.
I think you could be right, especially with that game being in Colorado. You know, 3-1 down in the series, coming off the back of a 5-2 loss. It's hard to see a way back for the Wild at this point. But yeah, you know, I do agree with you. I think that the playoff system needs an amendment. You know, I don't understand why they went away from the. Well, in fact, I know exactly why they went away from the 1 through 8 system. So, you know, instead, like, because in theory, the version of the playoffs that makes the most sense is that, you know, in each respective conference, you know, 1 plays 8, 2 plays 7, 3 plays 6, etc. In theory, then you're getting the kind of, you're rewarding the teams at the top by, in theory, giving them a somewhat easier playoff matchup in that first round. And then it stops you having to have teams like Dallas out in the first round. But, you know, the NHL wanted to keep it sort of in conference, and they wanted to help, you know, develop these rivalries, these rivalries that occur throughout the season, and it can carry on into the playoffs. And I don't buy it. I don't buy it. It's unfortunate for, you know, for Minnesota. I mean, they were always going to have either Dallas or Minnesota were always going to have the hardest run to the final. And unfortunately, I think Minnesota's playoff dream ends here.
Yeah. We just talk about the games in general. Obviously, that first game was just mental.
Yes.
Just
One
mental.
of the most bonkers games you've ever seen. 9-6 to Colorado.
It was ridiculous. And then the second game, we lost 5-2, and that was a pretty rough one for Minnesota, really. And then we came back and beat them 5-1. Albeit, I think a lot of those get, like, there was one empty netter. I know we've scored quite a few empty net goals recently, but then in the fourth game, we lost 5-2. We actually went one up, and it was a very, very close game, and we lost 2 empty net goals at the end there, so that's really pushed it out. So this series has not been a complete, utter blowout like I was kind of scared of. We are fighting. We've played this entire series without Eriksson Ek or Jonas Brodin. Quinn Hughes, I think, played 34 minutes in Game 4.
Wow.
It's just nuts, and we're just getting to the tail end of a season, going against the best team possible, and that's why I think it is going to come to an end here for the Wild. But Colorado are just, if we do get a Colorado-Carolina Stanley Cup, which is what I think should happen, they are the best 2 teams in the league this year.
Yeah,
that will be a fantastic Stanley Cup at the end of it.
yeah, it'll be a great final, and you know, that will be 2 teams that will, you know, hammer each other over the course of a series, and really, whichever team would come out on top in that scenario would be the best team, and, you know, deserved cup winners. But yeah, I mean, especially when you're missing Eriksson Ek, and, you know, who's obviously, you know, a key center in that Minnesota lineup, and then you know, you're having to line up against Colorado, who have, you know, McKinnon, Nelson, Kadri down the middle. It's, you know, it's absolutely absurd center depth that, you know, that they have. It's some proper, like, NHL video game franchise mode center core there, and they're just too good. They're just too good.
It's too good. And the Wild would beat Vegas. The Wild would beat the Ducks. I'm sorry, they would.
They would. Yeah, I'd back them. Yeah, I'd back them to beat both of those teams probably in like 6. Yeah. I don't think they'd trounce them, but I think they would beat them quite kind of comprehensively over 6 games, I would think. But yeah, look, you know, unfortunately, I don't see the playoffs format changing anytime soon. So we're going to have to, as long as Colorado are in this pomp, they're going to be the team to beat each year, and that'll have to be that. Minnesota will have to go out add a centre over the course of this summer. I think. Yeah, it's a shame. I'm gutted for you, but equally at the same time, like they're not exactly being robbed in this series. In Minnesota, I kind of feel like they've just unfortunately they've just come up against the better team.
Yeah, I'm still happy with how the season's gone. We got to the second round, which is nice, and we beat
absolutely.
Stars.
Yeah, at the start of the season, when we first started recording this podcast, the playoffs seemed a million miles away for Minnesota, and for them to be here now, kind of in the second round of the playoffs, and hanging in there with Colorado, massively commendable. So I think you can take heart from that, and on what has been a really, really good season. So yeah, kudos to the Minnesota Wild.
And that rounds up. It's weird. Every week now, the games get less and less and less. We've got 4 matchups we're talking about now. Next week we'll finish up these, and then we'll have 2 matchups to talk about. And then into a period where not much is happening.
Yeah. Like I said before, we've got all of the finalists for all of the respective trophies, all the interesting trophies you care about, and also the less exciting trophies that you don't really care about. But we're going to be here covering the finalists for all of them, and also I think maybe taking a little trip down memory lane for our predictions to the start of the season, so we can see just how far wide of the mark I was. And the only one I can think of off the top of my head is I was absolutely incredibly sure that Sam Rinzel was going to win the Calder Trophy for the Blackhawks this year. And that certainly did not happen.
I don't think he did, to be fair. I think that might have been your wild card, but I think he went Demidov.
Yeah,
anyway.
I certainly remember he was in the conversation. He was certainly in the conversation. Right,
You'll have to stay tuned to find out.
Yeah. Anything further from yourself, Nathaniel? Are we testing the soundboard? Can I get a drum roll? I know I can't get a round of applause, but can I get a drum roll? No. Oh! He's only gone and fixed it. He's only gone and fixed it. Ah, great news. Great news. Right, well, I'll tell you what. I'll settle for a round of applause instead of a drum roll. As always, guys, you can find us on both X and Instagram at the PvP Podcast. You can also find us on TikTok at Penalty Box Perspective. You can get in touch with us on Gmail at penaltyboxperspective@gmail.com if you've got any thoughts or feelings on the podcast, or if there's anything you want us to talk about, especially as we approach the off-season. Please give us some topics to talk about, because there's going to be not a lot of hockey to play, but we are still going to be here covering whatever happens. You can watch the podcast in video format even, on both Spotify and YouTube. You can go to the Penalty Box Perspective's official YouTube channel and subscribe there. Please consider dropping a like there as well, and please consider giving us a 5-star review on both Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Would really mean the world to us if you could. We'll be back, with some more playoff action, some award finalists, and stick with us, and we'll catch you on the next one.